And welcome back to the Fallout. We're looking at the fallout for the Bahrain Grand Prix. No, not Red Bull news. No Red Bull news here in relation to Horner. We've done another video about it. Well, a couple actually today. But let's talk about the other news in the fallout of the Bahrain Grand Prix coming out of the first weekend of F1 2024. We've got Ferrari. Yes, Fred Vassar saying Ferrari have clawed back some time. And it's fairly significant. Also, Hamilton saying we are in a building process. He's happy that they've got a really solid car, a good car to play with for the rest of the season. A lot more hopeful than 22 and 23. And we'll be looking at conclusions for the Bahrain Grand Prix from our Planet F1 article. So let's get into the fact that Ferrari have clawed back some time. And it says here, Vassar's claims Ferrari have clawed back 50%, that's 50% of the Bahrain deficit. And that's from 2023, which is absolutely fantastic, isn't it? But Vassar admits to mixed feelings about the Bahrain Grand Prix, but he stresses that the team had clawed back 50% of last year's deficit to Red Bull. If that's the case, a massive thumbs up. Bearing in mind in testing, everyone was saying, oh, the season's over already, before the fast times were done, and Red Bull look amazing. And as we know, in the 2023 season opener, Carlos Sainz finished fourth, 48 seconds behind winner Max Verstappen, while this year he was 25.1 seconds adrift of the Dutchman in third. Now, Vassar points to the smaller gap as evidence of the team being in a better position, and he also cited that Leclerc overcoming brake issues to claim fourth behind his teammate was also a positive. And it goes, you can say a bit of a mixed feeling after the race for sure, said Vassar. When asked about it by Ferrari's race, he said the positive is that we are able to do the pole position yesterday with the fastest lap, but Leclerc did it in the wrong session. Got the wrong memo maybe, and perhaps that we were compensated 50% of the gap with Red Bull in the race compared to 1 year ago, because then we were at 50 something seconds in the race, 48. I mean, it's not bad at all. He said the negative is that it's not enough, and that we had again too many issues during the weekend. We need to fix the issue in Charles's car with the brakes. But I think overall he did a good job. And then from the pit wall also, because we were able to manage the situation to save P4 in these conditions. Honestly, during the first stint, I saw the situation. I was not very optimistic. I mean, fair play to Ferrari. Things were going wrong. Things were going wrong for Mercedes as well. And there was also talk that Carlos Sainz, his brakes started to go a bit like Leclerc's towards the end of the race with the heat. And it goes, expanding on the brake issue, he said, we had a huge delta of temperature between the left and right. It was pulling on the braking and locking, and it was very difficult to fix. And at one stage, it came back when he was in the slipstream with someone. The brake switched on, and the last part of the race was okay. Lastly, he said the team suffered with tyres losing performance. Didn't happen as much this year, but while the situation's been proved, the race delta to Red Bull remains a concern. He said, this is also a mixed feeling. 1 year ago, I think we were at 8 or 9 tenths. Perhaps today we did 50% of the gap. But again, we are not there to be at 4 tenths. If you compare with last year and the recovery that we had during the season, the fact we were able to fight with them in the last part, I think we had a good opportunity. So it's looking not as bad maybe as it was last season in terms of the pace for Ferrari. And also Mercedes, I think I do think it was a horrendous race for Mercedes. And I think pretty much Mercedes would admit that themselves. But it's not the end of the world, I think, that it was in 22 and 23. And Hamilton has said Mercedes F1 are now in a building process. Lewis Hamilton says his Mercedes F1 team are now in a building process, having established the W15 is a better platform from which to start. And as we know, they had a difficult race in Bahrain with their power unit issues, from early on. Russell slipped back from what was a good early second to finish fifth. Hamilton went from 9th to 7th, which wasn't too bad. But you can't help thinking Mercedes should have really done more. All these rumours about their race pace after qualifying, making that sacrifice for the race pace. Now, the 7-time world champion reported battery issues early in the race, suffered with brake temperatures and a broken seat. And despite these woes, Hamilton described it as a super average race, he was in a positive mood. He said, I feel good, I don't feel downbeat, but what I feel is that the last couple of years we've had all these problems, and we spent several races undoing all these problems, like trying to figure out what those problems were, as opposed to now we have a platform that we can start adding stuff to. adding bricks and stuff. So now it's a building process from here. I think we're a great team in doing that. Hamilton faced a catalogue of problems during the race, losing grounds to rivals in the early stages. And he said, for a while, like my battery was dead, so down the straights I was derating the whole time. So I lost ground to the McLarens. I was fixing that out for some laps. It took a good 10 laps and I lost plenty of seconds through that. And you did. When you saw the delta, when you were watching it live, it was kind of depressing, I think, if you're a Hamilton fan. And he said, then after that, I was just really trying to get back on it and catch up as soon as we got fixed. And then there was a bit of overheating of the brakes. And then in general, the performance was so-so. And regarding his brake temperatures, he said, we didn't know how it was going to be today, but it was definitely worse than we planned. So fingers crossed going to Saudi Arabia. Yes, concerns, but they know what the problem is. Mercedes think they went too aggressive. And I mean, even George Russell has suggested that. Hopefully they sort it for Saudi and they have a much, much stronger race pace. So Planet F1 have got this article, conclusions from the Bahrain Grand Prix, and let's have a look and see what we think about them. So Red Bull driver Max got his title defence absolutely dominant. And it goes, why was there no attempt to slow down Red Bull? It said by the start of the third season of dominance in 2016, plans were already afoot to knock them off their perch. This was Mercedes. And with their Planet F1 asking, why haven't Red Bull been slowed? After 2 seasons of watching the sport being painted silver, with just 6 non-Merc victories, F1 Powers had seen enough. The solution was downforce and more downforce at the time, perceived to be one of Mercedes' few areas of weakness, but more pertinently, the great strength of their most dangerous threat, Red Bull and Adrian Newey, it says. And it says the 2017 regulations were one of 3 separate rule changes, and also the simplified wings of 2019 and the tapered floors of 2021 thrown at Mercedes, before F1 at last had its gotcha moment and finally wrong-footed them at the 4th attempt in 2022. And over the last 3 decades, from the ban on electronic aids to destabilise Williams in 1994 to the 2005 rule, specifically targeting Ferrari and Bridgestone, if you remember, preventing race tyre changes, F1's never hesitated when it comes to knocking back dominant teams. Now, what makes its reiterants to do anything about Red Bull in the face of the most crushing spell of dominance ever witnessed, they're saying, is all the more staggering. It patted itself on the back in 22 when it reportedly delivered raceable cars, and we're asking why? Why? But as time passed, it's become clear that those regulations have really done is unwittingly play directly into the hands of Newey, the only major figure in the entire paddock with that ground effect, experience of ground effect. Only he understood from the very start that the secret of cracking these rules was found in not in the car's underbody, but the suspension. Yeah, and they're basically saying why haven't they come up? And it goes 2026 regulations is on the horizon. Is there potential to apply some of those findings? This is a risk that has become complacent. So, welcome everyone to 2024, otherwise known as 2023 Part 3. And they do think it's potentially unsustainable, which I kind of agree. I mean, there was on Twitter after the race, there were quite a few, oh no, I'm going to cancel the F1 app, I'm going to cancel my Sky, which, yeah, I mean, you got to take with a grain of salt some of these people. They're just obviously understandably quite angry at a sport that they love and invest in. I mean, essentially, you're asking them to watch 24 weekends when you, like 2023, potentially know the result in terms of the winner anyway. But the shop window theory is flawed and an insult to Carlos Sainz, it says. If you're looking to irritate Carlos Sainz, ask him if he sees his final season at Ferrari as an opportunity to put himself in that shop window. A couple of times already, the question's been posed, and on each occasion, Sainz set to be replaced by Hamilton if you haven't yet delivered a firm response. He said, honestly speaking, I don't think I need a new season to prove that or show anyone what I'm capable of. He told media from planetf1.com. He said, I've been in F1 for 9 years, and over the 9 years, and especially the last 3, being with a team like Ferrari, everyone has seen more or less what I'm capable of. And let's be honest, he's very, very close to Leclerc, isn't he? Closer, potentially, than Sebastian Vettel was, particularly in his last season. So it says for a sport so technically advanced, there remains a nagging suspicion that when it comes to driver recruitment, F1 is still painfully unscientific compared to other sports such as football. Yeah, and it kind of is, isn't it? What other conclusions have they got? They obviously talk a lot about Sainz. Alpine, oh no, a team whose heart and soul is being torn out. You can spot a desperate team from a mile off these days. They're the ones with barely a lick of paint on the car. It was the must-have trend of 23, the exposed carbon look, as the teams left last sections to gain, to save weight. Then Red Bull, among the teams to resist the craze, won all but one race last season and exposed it for the fallacy it really was. So wisely, some teams, Mercedes and Williams, have moved away from the nude look, but they're suggesting obviously that Alpine hasn't. Brings us to Alpine, one of just 3 full-blown factory teams on the grid who have ceded all sense of identity by producing what is a black car, often with blue bits. There was a bit more blue bits on there in the end, I think, wasn't there? Sometimes with pink bits. The most alarming, though, is that it does not come as a surprise, having been telegraphed by Esteban Ocon over the winter in the aftermath of that 2023 season. And after 8 years spent meandering under Renault's ownership, the project, long regarded as a marketing campaign with an F1 team attached, it's now at risk of coming off the rails completely. It says for some time, it has seemed there is a battle raging at Enstone between the real racers, a talented and committed on-the-ground workforce, still keeping the spirit of the Schumacher-Alonso years alive, and the meddling, undermining bureaucrats within Renault. Yeah, throwing 100 race the plans at the wall like nobody's business and hoping some of it will stick. In that context, perhaps the public sacking of long-serving sporting director Alain Permain and Otmar Zafna at last year's Belgian Grand Prix was even more significant than thought. Was that the day they said the real races lost and the bureaucrats won? That was also the day another of Enstone's real races, Pat Fry, was appointed as Williams' new technical director, seeing more ambition in a team who had finished bottom of the standings for the 4 previous years than he did at Alpine. Yeah, that is saying something, isn't it? I mean, poor Alpine. It didn't feel there was enthusiasm to drive or move forward, Fry told media of his decision to leave. He said, I decided that I wanted to push things forward. I just don't want to sit there and not be able to do things. I think as a company, they almost weren't set up to push hard enough. Yeah, I mean, that's depressing, isn't it? Alpine are not good. Next up, it has Tsunoda versus Ricciardo, F1's spiciest 2024 rivalry. We had a story on that about the race. And it goes, of all the teammate battles on the grid, few have potential to turn as explosive as this, because potentially, I think, only one of them is going to survive into 2025. This is classic him or me territory, both with much to gain and still, for different reasons, much to prove, but equally everything to lose. Comfortably defeat Yuki, one of the understated stars of the season, and Ricciardo's hopes of claiming his former glory will be back on. Finish off at Daniel once and for all. Meanwhile, Tsunoda's reputation, it says, as well as his chances of remaining in F1 following Honda to Aston Martin, will rise. And if neither establishes a clear advantage, that could well be the end of both of them. Yeah, savage. So it maybe shouldn't have come as a great surprise that it took just one race for things to get tense, and it did, didn't it? They're pretty much Planet F1's conclusions to the Bahrain Grand Prix. If you made it to the end of my ramblings, absolutely like and subscribe, comment below, let us know what you thought of the Bahrain Grand Prix, and we will speak to you soon. Thank you very much.